Hi, welcome to the third part of the API test automation using C# and SpecFlow. So in this tutorial, we'll be talking about how we can place a GET transaction, a GET request, and then get the response, parse the response, and basically try to assert the response basically, right? So we'll be making use of certain .NET classes like HttpClient, HTTP response, right? So let's create a new feature file, okay, for our new example, right? So we'll add a new item here, and if you search here feature, you'll be able to get the SpecFlow feature file. Yeah, so let's add a naming convention to it. Say get req, something like get req.feature. Okay, and if you see, these are certain keywords, right? The feature is the keyword which define what the feature is. To test the get request, let's name something here. Okay, and scenario, so scenario is like something like get request testing. I mean, although the feature is more of on a generic level, on a global level, and scenario is more on an individual test case level, but for a naming convention, I'm just writing it for now, right? So I'm also given the user sends a get request, say with with URL as say okay, in a minute I'll just show you what URL we will be using. Then what you can do is when, just remove the when, and then we'll just directly write the then part, right? Because you already understand what the, so it's not a hard code thing that you have to use given, when, and then. So if you have certain test cases where you just want to give the condition and then what should be the expected thing, you can just write given and then as well. So it's not something that is hard coded. Okay, should be a success with 200 series code, 200 s codes. Okay, the URL that we'll be testing, right? So this is something that I found on the net, a basic request.in. So this is basically a website wherein certain endpoints are exposed, and you can just get those or post that, and you can play around with the API, right? So now we have one basic API here called get single user, right? So let me just show you. So if you see, this is the response, this is the expected response here, with the response status goes at 200. Now let me just copy this. Okay, yeah, so let me just write this over here. Okay, if you want specific slash API slash what is that? Yeah, it's already here, right? See, I've written it before, slash API slash user slash 2. Okay, so if you see, that is the exact, this is the same response that we are talking about, right? This is the expected response here. Okay, so let's try to hit this get call. Okay, so basically, if you see, this is the URI with the and request.in is the host name part, and the remaining is more on the your local paths, right? These are your paths, and you can and further down you can have query parameters as well, but it's not here, right, in this case. So let's use this it's not always necessary that you can hard code it. I'll show you different ways in our upcoming videos wherein you create an object of the URI, and then you can hard code it somewhere in your property file, and then your base URL will always be constant, and mostly your query parameters or your paths keep changing, right? So we'll cover that in our future videos as well. So let's create step definitions for this. So you all are aware, right? For every steps in a scenario, you need to have step definitions, right? So let's copy this for now. Define steps. Let's go to define steps. Copy it. Copy to clipboard. And let's create a new step definition. Let me create a new class. Name the class as you can write something like http test.cs. okay, So now let's paste the bindings and others thing over here. Okay, so let's paste this here, the one that we copied just now, right? So if you see this, this gives you a, it gives you a beautiful bindings, right? You not write your method bindings like the given, when, and then everything, right? So the only thing that you have to do over here is just write the binding keyword here. Okay, so if sometimes, you know, if it asks you explicitly, you can just add it here, on the packages part, right? Like using techtalk.specflow, right? So if you just write using techtalk.specflow, then you will be able to get all this binding stuff. Okay, so now, so if you see this, the first one says the user sends a get request with URL as blah 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 blah. Okay, so in the other one, see, now this is currently a purple in color. So now let's try to build this. Once we build the solution, it identifies that there are certain they have found a binding, and they have found the method codes for that, and it will become yellow, right? The first one I told you is, the first thing that we have to do is identifying the classes which will help us send those requests. So there are a particular class called the HTTP client class. Okay, so if you read this from the Microsoft definition, provides a class for sending HTTP request and receiving HTTP response from a resource identified by a URI, right? That's exactly what we want, right? So we'll try to create an object of these, and then we'll try to see what are the properties, what are the method that we can see, right? So you know, some of the properties it has is base address, default proxy, default request headers, request version, right? And if you see some of the methods it has is, you know, get byte, get post, put, and all. When we write our end-to-end framework, we'll try to use the send async, which will be very common across for all the HTTP method types. But now, so let's first create the constructor for this class. Yeah, so I'll also tell you why the constructor is needed here. Okay, so whenever we have a binding from our step definitions to a binding class, a step definition class, the constructor will be called first, right? So now we have created the object of the HTTP client, right? So now let me just put it across everything, so that, you know, it's like it's common, right? And everybody can use that inside every method, functions, and body. And okay, so using the HTTP client, we have certain methods which will help us send that request, right? So if you see HTTP client dot, as I told you, there is one method called get async, right? Get async. Okay, so now if you see this, what it takes, HTTP client dot get async, it is the string, and what are the string contains a request URI. Okay, so let's just send the request URI. Okay, so this is, so they have by default they name it as PO P1 and all. So let's give it some you know, readable name to it. So let me just name this as URI. Okay, and pass this in our parameter here. One second. Okay, so now if you see this carefully, what it says is HTTP client dot get async string, and if you see this, it returns an HTTP response. Okay, right. So let's just write this HTTP message response. Okay, okay, here it is, HTTP response message response equal to this. Okay, let me just write this, let me just make this at the class level, let me just define this at the initialize this at the class level. Okay, now you might be getting an error here, right? So what it says is cannot convert type system threading task to system threading dot task to the system.net HTTP response message. So there is a concept of task async and await. Okay, so there will be cases wherein a single request might take a lot of time to execute that, right? So in that case, there is a concept of async and await, wherein the thread for that particular time, an asynchronous behavior comes into the picture, and the thread which takes care of this particular behavior is released, and it goes and does something else, and then from the thread pool it takes some other stuff, and then when it identifies that the work is over, it comes back and takes care of it, right? So I'll discuss this in further details. For now, you just understand that in these particular methods, we have to write async and await here. Okay, so let me just uh, add an async here. Okay, okay. Now we have got this in a response, right? So basically, as I told you, we have got this whole HTTP client in a response. Now if you see this response here, what is the stuff that you get inside this response, right? So if you see, we can actually get the content from this property. We can make sure that it comes under the success status code. Okay, so let's look each and let's look at some of the things that you can do using the response, right? So if I click on this, like ensure success status code. Okay, now if let's go to the HTTP response message. So it says that throws an exception if the is success status property for an HTTP response is false. Okay, now if you talk about what this is success status code is, so the is success status code property is if the response code is within the 200 to 299 series, say over here, true if the status code was in the range of 200 to 299, which is generally the success codes, right? For example, in your get call, generally you get 200, in your post call you get 201, right? So if it is within the series, that means this is some success response, and if not, then it will be a failure, it will throw an exception, right? So if you see the other if you see the other method over there, throws an exception if the is success status property for the HTTP response is false, right? So it returns a boolean. That property returns a boolean, but and in case if it is false, it throws an exception, and if in case it is true, it'll pass, right? The statement passes, right? So now this is basically how you can you can get the response and work with it. Okay, now similarly, with if you want to get the actual response, say the response body, right, you can use the content. Okay, now what content does is there's another class called the HTTP content. Okay, now that content can store stores your HTTP response message. Okay, and you can use its multiple methods, and you can get the headers, you can get the whatever if you want, you can deserialize it and get it in terms of certain models. You can parse it, get the JSON in certain the way that you want, right? So now let's just quickly get this in certain form called content dot read as yeah read as string async. So we'll get this response in a string, right? So let me just quickly uh, name a variable here, string response body. Okay, string response body, and let me just quickly come down and put that in the response body. Okay. Oopsie, sorry. Okay, so whenever you are using any of the methods or functions of the HTTP client or the response, you have to wrap it around with the await and the async, right? So since you're trying to work with an asynchronous model, okay, you're working with SpecFlow, right? There's another there is a way where you can print the response, okay. There is certain interface, okay, ISpecFlowOutputHelper. So if you through this you can actually uh, output your whatever details that you want from your step definition on your console, right? So this is done through a context injection. I'll be explaining that what the context injection is, okay. So okay, so let me just quickly put this here, put this in the using class name, okay. So I'll tell you the rules of how to get context injection as well, okay. Okay, so now let's use this SpecFlow output helper, okay, to print the the response body or whatever you want, okay. So basically let's print the response body, okay. Let's do one thing, let's just run this, okay. Let's run this and see how is it working fine, or if there are any errors or something. So quickly let's go to our test explorer and do a run all, okay. Amazing, okay. So if you see this get request thing here, okay, so let me just expand it for you, okay. So if you see the output on the console here, see the first step in your scenario is given the user sends a get request with this URL, okay, and now we have got the response here, okay. So this is exactly the same response that we wanted when we hit from the browser, right? It's exactly the same response, right? Data ID email janet.weaver@request.in, right? So that's exactly the same response that we have got, and it has printed it, and the request should be so everything is great over here. So let's also complete the remaining part of the code wherein we are trying to assert the actual response, right? So let's write an assert here, okay. Assert dot true, okay, and see it's giving an auto suggestion here as well, okay. So now what the statement does is response dot a success status code, okay. So if I just showed you some time back that in your HTTP response there is a property, okay, called is success status code, and in case if it is true, it's all good, right? You're expecting it to be true, and in case if it is false, then but since we have put the assertion as false, it would fail if it is false, right? So it should be true in that case. So let's quickly run the remaining set and then we are good. Let me just run the one that we want, okay. Cool, okay, all good. So just one thing that I had pending was how the dependency injection works, right? So there are a couple of rules how you implement dependency injection here, okay. I'll take that in a very detailed manner in the later video, but just there are certain rules that needs to be defined here for a context injection to work, okay, according to the new SpecFlow. The first thing is whichever so for example you have a variable which represent your interface, okay. In this case your ISpecFlowOutputHelper, okay, this is the interface which has certain implementation classes, but over here what you define is within the constructor of the class you pass it in the constructor, your parameterized constructor, and then you assign the instance of that to the variable. For example, to this dot, so which denotes the instance of this class, right? So this is getting initialized with this ISpecFlowOutputHelper. Now you might ask, where is this getting created, or how you're not creating an object of it? So you can leave that to the SpecFlow. At runtime they'll have the objects created, and it'll give the right context to you at runtime. Okay, so this is just to give you a basic rules. But yeah, as in when we go, I'll teach you, I'll explain you a lot more on the dependency injection part and how it works. Yeah, so hope you like the video. Please like, subscribe, and please share and like the video, and please let me know in the comments if you want anything else to be explained in the future series. And then probably in the next series we'll cover how we can, on the similar code, how we can use, how we can parse the response using the data modeling, using Newtonsoft or HTTP JSON libraries. Yeah, so thank you.